Oh, the Dallas Cowboys, America's favorite bandwagon team of several decades ago. Yeah, Cowboys. How about them Cowboys? The Chicago Bears of Texas. And when you think about the past couple of decades of history, is it really that far off? And as I always talk about, if not anything, it's worse because the Bears have more recently went to an NFC Championship game with Jay Cutler as their starter and a Super Bowl with Rex Grossman as their starter. And meanwhile, the Cowboys wasted Tony Romo and basically have wasted Dak Prescott. That's something. But we all thought a big part of the problem in Dallas was Jason Garrett. And let's be clear, he was. He absolutely was. And when you find out that they hired Mike McCarthy, this was supposed to be something. You're bringing in a championship head coach, a guy that's been around the block a lot. You're expecting this guy to come in and really, help the Cowboys start off with the bang. I know I certainly anticipated it, and I was flat out wrong. I saw that the rest of this division was doo-doo, but I thought, hey, the Cowboys, McCarthy coming in, they got to be like a 12-win team. And I think that's where the unconscious bias of always hearing about the Cowboys sometimes can cloud your better judgment. But nonetheless, I thought this team would win the division at least relatively comfortably, and people would be talking about how great of a job Mike McCarthy did. Instead, his first year started off with a queef. It was really bad. The defense, it got off to an absolutely horrendous, tremendously awful start. And what really killed him throughout the year was injuries. And that's not an excuse that you could just coast by on. But you also have to be realistic. They weren't just missing one or two guys. They were missing several guys for large chunks of games, most of the season, if not all of the season. And quite a number of these were starters or really key contributors, like La'el Collins. He didn't play at all this year with the hip injury. Blake Jarwin tore his ACL in the first game. You only got 2 games out of Tyron Smith. So that's a key piece of your team, a key piece of that offensive line that used to be such a big strength for the Cowboys is now a weakness. You only got 10 games out of Zach Martin. You had Dak Prescott go down in that 5th game of the year with that horrific leg injury. Leighton Vander Esch, former first-round pick, 10 games. Sean Lee playing his standard 9 games a year. Chidobe Awuzie only played in 8 games. Dontari Poe in 7 games. I go on and on and on and on with all these guys that you anticipating having big contributions this year, playing half of the season, a little over half of the season, less than half of the season, or none of the season at all. In today's salary cap era, there's only but so much that you can do to mask that problem. There's only but so much depth that you can call on to play him, come up and step up and play at a suitable, similar type of level. It's just not going to happen. And then what's really bad for the Cowboys is, it's one thing if everybody else was beating you, but you should have been at least be able to beat the folks within your own division, and instead they went 2-4. And as the year went along, you started to see the bad things you heard about McCarthy at the end of his Packers tenure. And Packers fans talk about he fails to adjust, and he seems like he doesn't know what he's doing, and his game plans are not well thought out. You started to see some of that crap here in Dallas this year. So he's going into year 2 coming up, I understand, but that seat's got to be a little warm. It's got to be a little hot. Because Jerry Jones doesn't have the same type of familial type of feelings for a Mike McCarthy as he did a Jason Garrett. But you look at them offensively, they had 8 games where they scored 20 points or less, obviously losing Dak Prescott and some of the injuries on the offensive line. That's huge. Even with the great wide receiving trio that they have there with CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper, you would expect this team to still be able to consistently put up points even with the backup quarterback, but they struggled at times for sure. And then their defense was god-awful at the beginning of the year and never really got truly a whole lot better. They had 8 games where they gave up 30 or more points. Again, in today's NFL, having a dominant defense is overrated, I feel. But you got to be able to stop folks at some point in time. And the Cowboys just really, really struggled at key times. So now you go into this offseason where you might have been expecting the Cowboys were going to win the NFC East and they were going to go on a bit of a run. And Dak Prescott is going to make a big statement and totally validate why he didn't sign the long-term extension that was offered by the Cowboys because he wanted more. More power to you, Dak. Get it. And yeah, That didn't happen. So now as we go into the offseason, you're sitting there saying, what are we going to see with Dak Prescott's contract situation? He's coming off of that serious leg injury, but he's still a young quarterback in the league in his mid-20s. He's had some good statistical seasons. He's dealt with the pressure of playing on America's team. The Cowboys have to get this deal done right. They're going to get this deal done right. Or are they going to try and play the Kirk Cousins role of trying to tag him again and then kick the can down the road? I don't know, but you made the commitment before, the statement before to go with Dak. Like, unless you have any other reason to truly, really think otherwise, you should absolutely be trying to re-sign him and get it done quickly. No reason to delay. But the problem for the Cowboys is while they only have about $20 million in cap space, they got a shit ton of free agents. It's not just Dak. It's Tyrone Crawford, Sean Lee, Andy Dalton, Cameron Irving, Joe Looney, Alden Smith, Chidobe Awuzie, Jordan Lewis, Xavier Woods. So you're talking about several guys from their secondary. Alden Smith, who I thought had a nice year in his return to the NFL. But the biggest piece of all, obviously, was Dak Prescott getting hurt. That really killed him. Now, they brought Dan Quinn in to coach the defense, which I thought was really interesting because Atlanta invested heavily in the defensive side of the ball, and the defenses the past couple of years really stunk. Like, they stunk up the joint. So I'm very interested to see how he's expected to turn around the performance of this Cowboys defense. And they need him to, because this unit certainly underwhelmed in 2020. When you look at the offseason, though, and you look at the team needs, you say, well, team need number one is you need to re-sign Dak. Stop being stupid, get it done. Because then otherwise, if you don't, you potentially lose your franchise quarterback, and who knows what could happen afterwards when you try to replace him. So team need number one is to get a damn deal done with Dak, and don't get cute. Don't play around, because otherwise a team like the Bears or somebody else is going to come sniffing around, offering you some picks. You're going to be tempted to take it, and then you're probably going to live to regret it for the next decade plus. It's just as simple. In terms of other needs in this team, I would say offensive line is a big one, both tackle and guard. Like, you can assume a return to health to Tyron Smith and La'el Collins, sure. But even then, wouldn't you want to have some depth along that offensive front? Maybe you take a guy that could play outside in the future but can play guard now. But they need help. This is part of the big problem for the Cowboys. Their offensive line for a few years was thought of as elite and one of the best in the league. And it was. It absolutely was. And they were a key part of the success of this team, which led them to giving the big money deal to Ezekiel Elliott, because they said, well, we've got this great offensive line, and he's putting up big numbers behind him. It's really hard to walk away from him. But when that offensive line isn't there, your quarterback's going to be under siege more, and your running back can't find the same quality of running lanes that he would have had previously. So they definitely need to address that offensive line. And then I would see on the defensive side of the ball, too. Like, I could make an argument that every area of that defense has needs, and potentially multiple needs at that. This was a team that was supposed to have some aspirations and expectations this year, and instead they largely just fall flat on their face, and they were really, really bad. So I would certainly expect that this offseason will have some defensive leanings to it, and I certainly expect the NFL draft coming up at the end of April is going to have a very strong defensive flavor for the Dallas Cowboys. But if you're a Cowboys fan, I'm kind of curious on your thoughts and perspectives here. Do you think it's all Mike McCarthy's fault and or that he was just an unmitigated disaster in 2020? Do you wish that Jerry Jones would have fired him? As far as the Dan Quinn being hired to be the defensive coordinator, do you think Dan Quinn's the type of guy that you have a lot of confidence in, that he's going to get more out of this defense? What about all these free agents that you guys have? And most notably of all, of course, is the Dak Prescott situation. What do you think's going to go on with Dak? Is he going to be back? Somebody else going to try and sign him and trade for him? Like, what is it? That was hard with the Cowboys here, because you look at it and you say, well, if most of these guys come back healthy, they'll be an infinitely better team. Infinitely better might be a bit of a stretch, but I would certainly expect them to be a better team. But can you realistically count on all those guys coming back and being relatively healthy? Because some of these guys have a history of going down with different assorted injuries, like Leighton Vander Esch and Sean Lee, etc. Like, how much can you really count on them? But yeah, the Cowboys are in this really bad spot. They didn't lose enough games to be in the top 5 and really have a quarterback decision on their hands. But they didn't win enough to win that crappy division and make the playoffs. And it's all their fault, ultimately. And don't get me wrong, I love the fact that the Cowboys missed the playoffs again this year. Like, it makes me feel warm inside when that happens. Even though understanding that when the Cowboys are good, it's good for the league and all of that. You know what? It's time to try and put over some other folks that stop trying to make the Dallas Cowboys the John Cena of the NFL, where they always force it down your throats no matter how much they really don't deserve the spot that they've been given.